Okay, I been making. I think I've made four episodes of my podcast, but they're a bit of a mishmash. So today I've made a few notes, and then I'll read you the notes, and these are the things that I've got to discuss: mission to Iran, forgery of tax disc, German checks on diesel, first driving with no tax insurance or driving license, the St. John's train crash, the Cologne train to Munich, the Czech border currency, the petrol incident in Czechoslovakia without any coupons, and Bratislava. People helped me when I got stuck at traffic lights and they put stuff under my wheels. I had to fix the air leak in the hose for the diff lock for the unit. I had no chains. I planned to buy cheaper chains at Istanbul. The road was icy. At one junction I slid for 200 meters. I slid for 200 meters and just managed to stop. I stopped for one night when it was minus 28. There was about a quarter inch of frost inside the cab. I had a bad stomach and I was in two sleeping bags, and I had to get out of the cab and stoop in the snow, and I had a very bad stomach, had diarrhea. And I'll cut this short, but then I had to get back into the cab and get warm again, and I was shivering like mad. And this happened 3 times. 3 times I had to get out of the cab. And then after that, I went to Budapest in Hungary, and then from there to Romania, where I had some problems with the truck, and I had to get some help. And then I changed my Czech money in Bulgaria at a hotel. So that's the stuff I've got to cover. I'm going to start with this. The first item on this list is the forgery of the tax disc. Well, I told you I had a very, very nice Volvo tractor unit, and the tax for a year at the time, about maybe 1974, 75, was about £1,200 a year. That's a lot of money. And I was only virtually driving from Kent to Dover, a distance of 50 or 60 miles. And the rest of the time I was on the continent. So I thought I hardly use this vehicle in the UK. So I found out that there was a certain tax disc which you could buy if you were a circus. It was called, I can't remember the name, but if you had a circus or a fun fair and you were transporting vehicles, the tax was only £25 for a year. So I actually went to Maidstone, to the tax office there, and I bought it's called a showman's license. I bought a showman's license for £25, and then what I did, where it said the price, I had done some cut and pasting, not with a computer, of course. Before computers, I had a genuine disc, which I managed to take the centre out and paste one behind the other, and then I put it onto the windscreen in the car, in my truck, and it looked like I had paid the full price with a genuine road tax. And I suppose it was I don't know why I did these kind of things. I think is I grew up just after the war, and I always was. I never asked my parents for money. I always worked from the age of very, very young, from the age of 11. I always worked, always doing jobs, but I never did anything. I never stole a thing in my life. But I'm telling you about this tax disc. I did that, I don't really think I could have afforded to pay £1,200, so I was more or less forced into it. So it's really not a crime, is it? If you have to do something, is it really a crime when you're doing it to feed your family? I don't think so. I mean, do you want to give the money to the government, or do you want to give the money to your family to pay the mortgage and so we can eat, etc., etc., etc.? Yes, I know it's not legally a very good excuse, but I did it. And I drove a truck along many trips, taking trailers to Dover and taking the ferry to the continent. And I was coming back from a trip from the continent. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was a place on the road between Dover and Canterbury on the A2 where there was a big lay-by, very long, maybe 300, 400 metres long. And that was often a place where the police would pull you in and check your logbook. Now, another thing with logbooks, this was before the time of when you had this, I can't think what the name is. In modern trucks now, you've got it records everything you do every time you start and stop, etc. But in my days, you had a logbook, and you had to show what time you started, when you took your break, and when you finished. And I think you could only drive maximum of 11 hours. Yeah. So I always had 2 logbooks, one which was genuine and one which was not. So if I was stopped, I would always show the one that was okay with to the police. Now, when I was stopped on this trip coming back from Dover, I was pulled into the lay-by and stopped. I was waved down and stopped. And a policeman came with a torch, and he shone the torch looking at my tax disc, and he looked very closely. He was only a metre away, and he stared at it. It must be for 20 seconds, and I didn't kind of show any emotion. And he checked my logbook. He said, "Okay, carry on," which I did. That was the closest I got to getting caught. Okie dokie. Where next? Right, I told you about that tax disc. Another thing that was quite tricky was that you could save money on diesel if you bought red diesel. Now, red diesel is if you're a farmer and you have a tractor. The normal diesel was more or less colourless, but red diesel was so cheap that I knew a man called Lee who had a breaker's yard, and I used to go there for spares for my cars, and we got chatting, we got quite friendly, and he said to me, he said he knew that he knew that I had a haulage business, and he said, "Why don't you take some red diesel?" He said, if you're only driving from here to Dover, fill the tank with red diesel. I thought, that's a bit risky, isn't it? But we developed a method where we could fill the tank with red diesel. You're talking about, I don't know what it's a big tank, and two tanks. So we would fill the tank, and then we developed a tube that fitted inside the filler cap, which was a long tube, about 50 centimetres long, which we put normal diesel in. So if we were stopped, the only place you were going to get stopped, it was in Germany. Now, when you went through the checkpoint in Germany, you always were checked, and they'd check your fuel. They'd take the cap and they would have a look and stick a rod into the tank to see if you had red diesel or if it was genuine. I only did that a couple of times because that really did frighten me. of getting caught, because I knew that was quite serious. In Germany, they don't mess around. There's no way you can say, okay, take your wallet out and, maybe can we sort this out if I give you a donation for the policeman's ball, something stupid like that. The policeman's ball. It reminds me of a John Cleese film, The Secret Policeman's Ball. Yeah. How we doing with this video? 10 minutes. Okay. So that was the worry I had with diesel, and I only did it a couple of times. And I want to tell you a little bit about how I started driving. I first, I told you that I went to a party with my girlfriend who worked in Twinings on the other side of the Strand from where I worked. Went to the party and I got very, very drunk, as one does. And I was a little bit drunk, and I'd been down to the toilet, and I came back from the toilet in the basement. I came back and I saw some boys offering to light my girlfriend's cigarette. I was incensed. I went over. I said, "You should get away from my girlfriend," and I shoved him over the chairs, and he fell over. Because I was drunk. It was a stupid thing to do. I've done so many stupid things in my life. I'm 82 years old. God, I don't know. I've done some bad stuff. I've worked hard all my life. I have. I've worked hard. But what happened next? I went down to the toilet. I was standing there. I didn't see anyone behind my back when a gang of boys came down. Teddy boys. We were all teddy boys. All teddy boys. Oh, the hairstyle was a DA. A DA stands for duck's arse. And you use a lot of Brill cream on your hair, but anyway, they came down and they attacked me. They punched me and they kicked me, and my suit was, my beautiful blue suede suit was torn, and my nose was bleeding. Well, I didn't cry. I mean, I was 18 years old, and they left, and I went back upstairs. I was very, very drunk. I was very, very drunk. And my girlfriend, she put me into a cab and told the cab driver where to take me, which was in Breakspears Road, Brockley, London, Southeast 4. I got home and I went to bed. I don't remember very much at all, but the next morning I slept quite late and I felt quite unwell. You might call it a hangover. And I didn't feel too good. I never missed a day's work, but that day I said to my mother, "Can you please phone? Can you phone my firm and say, I've got a tummy upset?" In a way I had. So my mother phoned to say, "Bob won't be in today because she's not feeling too good. He's got a tummy upset." So that was okay. And about midday, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, I was feeling lively, and I thought, I'm going to walk down to the station. I'm going to walk down to the newsagents and buy a paper. So I went down Breakspears Road to Brockley. I turned left. I went to the newsagent shop, and I stopped for a moment, looking in the window where they had these postcards with advertisements. I don't know why I was looking, and something caught my eye. I saw there was a car for sale. It was I think it was a 1932 Morris 8. 1932 Morris 8. Now I was then 18 years old, so it must have been 1950, don't know, was it 56, 57? Yeah, so I saw this advertisement. It had the address and phone number. So I phoned. A lady answered the phone, and she gave me the address, and it was in Catford, London, SE6. So I took the bus and went to Catford and found the house. And in the drive there, it was quite a posh area, and in the drive on the left-hand side of the house, the car was parked. So I didn't really look much at the car at all. I didn't seem very interested in what the car was like at all. I was only interested, and I had money because I'd gone to the post office. I'd always saved money from a very young boy. I'd always saved my very first job. I got £3 a week. Out of the £3, I gave my mother 30 shillings. My season ticket on the train for the week was 7 shillings and 6pence. And I had luncheon vouchers, so I didn't have to pay for any lunch because the firm gave me luncheon vouchers, and I had a lovely lunch every day. There was a beautiful restaurant above the pub and the really good home cooking. And after I'd been in hospital, now I hadn't matured at all, hardly. I really hadn't matured physically or sexually, and I was still only 5 feet 2 inches tall. But working in Alden Tilbury at 20 Old Queen Street, just off the Parliament Square, and having that lovely lunch every single day, and I was there for about a year and a half. Would you believe it? In a year and a half, I grew from 5 feet 2 to 5 feet 11 and a half. I still didn't have a lot of meat on me, but I was quite tall. And now I've got to get back to what was I talking about? I was talking about, the first car. Yes, I rang the bell, and the lady came to the door, and I said, I've come to see you about the car. She said, yes, it's my son's car. It's my son's car. I said, She said, would you like to try it? I said, yes, okay. She gave me the keys, and most cars then, they didn't start very well. There was a handle for the handle. Put the handle in, turn the ignition on, give it a little bit of choke, bit of choke. Nothing automatic in those days. All messing around, fiddling around with the controls. And it started okay. So I took the handle out, put that in the back of the car, and I started to drive. It's the first time I'd ever been on a road in a car, apart from that little short test in my father's Jaguar, about 300 metres. But I thought to myself, how hard can it be? You've got a clutch, and you've got a gearbox, and you've got an accelerator, you've got a clutch, a brake, and an accelerator. Yes. And it was a very quiet area, and it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon then. So I drove, and I always seem to know that learners would it took them a long time to get used to the clutch, and the car would kangaroo. But I never did that. From the very first time I drove that car, I just drove it. I drove steady. I drove up and down the road. I changed gear. I did some turn, went around a few blocks. I spent about 20 minutes getting used to the car. And then I thought, right, I'm going to do something really crazy now. I'm going to drive this to London. Yes. I'm going to drive to London. I'm going to surprise my girlfriend. We used to meet after work, just after 5, and then walk along the Strand and get the 5:20 from Charing Cross to Brockley. But she didn't know where I was going to be. She didn't even know that I wasn't at work. So I drove to London, and I parked the car on the embankment, and it was snowing. And the windscreen wipers didn't work, so I put my hand outside through the window to keep the windscreen clean, like this. The window wouldn't wind down or up, it was down, and the handbrake didn't work. So, of course, if a handbrake doesn't work, what do? You just put it in first gear. I suppose you could put it in reverse. I put it in first gear, I left the car there, on the embankment, along the River Thames. I walked up from the Thames through the Temple. I waited for my girlfriend as she came out, and I said to her, I said to her, I tell you what, instead of walking along the Strand, why don't we make a change and walk? Let's walk along the Thames on the embankment. Oh, so really? I said, yeah, make a change, wouldn't it? Yeah. She said, but we might miss the train. I said, well, we can always catch another train, but I fancied a walk along the embankment. I didn't tell her why. Didn't tell her. So we walked down through the Temple, down to the embankment, walked along the pavement, and I stopped. She said, why have you stopped? I turned to her and I looked at her and I said, get in. She said, what? I said, get in the car. She said, what car? I turned around and I said, this car. I said, she said, is that your car? I said, yes. But she said, but you don't drive. I said, I know, but I bought it and I drove it here. So I must be able to drive, mustn't I? Oh, it is so funny. And then it was about 5:10, 5:15, we started to drive. And we got to the Elephant and Car. We went over Westminster Bridge. And we got to one of the main, very busy traffic, rush hour. All stop, start. Got to the Elephant Castle, a big junction, where there are about 5 roads that all meet in the Elephant and Castle. And the car had started to boil. And steam was coming out of the front. And the car packed up, it stopped. I got out, put the starting handle in, and I couldn't stop the car. It wouldn't stop. And the traffic was piled up behind me. So I went across. There was a police constable in the middle of this junction, controlling the traffic with his hands, just hand signals. No traffic lights. In fact, there were very few traffic lights at that time in London. So I said to the officer, "Excuse me, officer, it seems I have a little bit of a problem with my car. So could you give me a hand to push it to the other side of the junction?" "Certainly, sir," he said. Well, of course, what else could he do? Because there was a big traffic jam in 5 different directions. So he came with me, and I managed to steer through the window, and we pushed the car to the other side of the junction. We stopped on the left-hand side of the road, about 100 yards from the junction. At that time, you could park wherever you liked. No yellow lines, no parking meters. No one to tell you can't park here or you can't park there. You park wherever you liked. The only thing that you could do that you could get into problem was causing what they call an obstruction. If you block somebody's way, but if you just park anywhere you could park, no problem. It's all changed now. It's all changed. But they were the good old days. So we parked the car, and just across the road, I noticed 2 things. Of course, the first thing that we thought of was, there's a fish and chip shop. I said, let's go and get fish and chips. So we went to the fish and chip shop, and they always serve you fish and chips in newspaper, of course. So we had cod and chips. We brought it back and sat in the car in the freezing cold in December with the snow coming down. We were freezing cold. And we ate our fish and chips. And then only about 50 metres on the other side of the road was a cinema. I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's let the car cool down. We'll get some water and we'll go to the cinema. Okay, she said, okay. So off we went to the cinema and we saw whatever film. I have no idea what film it was, but we were about 3 hours in the cinema. We came out at 10:30. We got some water from the fish and chip shop, put some water in the car, and it started. By then, there was no traffic at all, just normal traffic. There was no stop-start. No, this is an unbelievable situation we were in. Now, you will not believe this. Honestly, you won't believe me. Honestly, you will not believe this. We drove to our house in Brockley. I lived in Breakspears Road, Brockley, London, South-East 4. And outside the house there was 2 police cars. Oh, thank God, what's going on here? So I stopped just outside the house behind these cars and I got out. And I went into the house. My mother and father were there. And my mother started to cry. She said, I said, what's the matter? What's the problem? My mother said, thank God. Thank God. I said, what? She said, there's been a terrible crash at St. John's. I could feel myself going white. I said, really? It was a foggy night. It was foggy. I remember that it was foggy. A lot of the visibility was quite poor. Yes, she said, 158 people they think have been killed. 3 trains have collided, and we know you always catch that train. The police were there, and they said, are you okay? We said, yes, we're fine. They didn't ask about the car. They didn't ask about my driving license or the tax or the insurance, nothing. They just said, your parents had phoned the police to say that you had been on that train and it was 10 o'clock at night and you weren't home. So we wanted to make sure what was going on. We'd been down to the St. John's site and we didn't know whether you were there or not. So we came to tell your mother that we couldn't say who was missing and who had died and who wasn't and who was alive. But of course I had, for some reason, decided not to take that train. I bought a car instead, and because of that, I'm here to talk to you today. Now look, I've been talking to you now for 27 minutes, and I'm tired, and it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to stop now. Thank you.